Hey, we are picking up at Genesis 21 and we're going to take it through verse 21. So we are still in the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 21, and we are going to run from verse 1 to verse 21 and we're going to talk about Hagar. She is finally back part of the story and we are going to discuss her freedom. So she is currently, a little background info on Hagar, is currently the second wife to Abraham, and she has had his first child, who is Ishmael. And Ishmael is a teenager at the point that we're getting ready to pick up in verse 21. He was born when Abraham was 86 years old. And so we are getting ready to turn the page and be into Abraham being 100 years old. And so we're going to start off at verse 1. And it says, the Lord dealt with Sarah as he had promised, or he did for Sarah what he promised he was going to do. And she has a baby. So she has a baby in her old age, according to the way God told her that she would be able to have this baby. And so Abraham names his son Isaac. And Isaac is the second son of Abraham, but is the first within this marriage. And so it gives us an understanding in verse 4 that he followed the command that God had commanded them previously, is that every male at 8 days old when they're born is circumcised. And so Isaac gets circumcised just according to that covenant between Abraham and the people that come from Abraham and those related and around him and God. And so it says that in verse 5, Abraham was 100 years old. So when he's 100 years old, and his first son Ishmael was born when he was 86. So right now Ishmael is about 13, 14 years old. And so in verse 7, Sarah remembers that she had been barren for a very long time. She is 90 years old when this child is born. She has been barren her whole life. She is 90 and having her first child. And she is just amazed by the fact that not only can I have a baby, but I'm able to nurse this baby. Like, not only did my body hold on to this baby, but it continued to do what it's supposed to do the way that it does for young mothers. And so time passes, several years go on, and it says that the child grew and was weaned. And in verse 8, it says, Abraham made a great feast. Like, he threw a whole party. He is celebrating that his child has survived this infancy and these toddler years where, stuff happens. And he is celebrating this point, and it says when his child was weaned. So for us in our American minds, you got to take that off. Typically we wean our kids sometimes 2-3 months, sometimes 6-7 months, sometimes we go a year or two. But in these situations, in these type of developing countries, early on, they would nurse their children until they were 3 or 4 years old, because that was a way to ensure that they would get proper nutrition and always have a meal. Because if you're wandering through the desert, it might be a ways before you get some water. It might be a ways before you can get food that can be processed down into something a baby can eat. It might be some time for that. So this way, nursing this child long term is a way to ensure that your milk supply would stay and that you would be able to nurture and care for this child long term. But when they get to a point where they are done, oh, it's a party. This is a whole kid right here. And so he is celebrating that his son is older and he has passed a lot of those kind of worrying moments that you have as a parent for your child. And in verse 9, Sarah sees Ishmael playing with his brother. Some versions of the Bible say mocking, some versions of the Bible say playing. And I think what is important to know is the two boys are interacting and it bothers Sarah. So in all of my research and study, I was like, was he teasing this baby? Because this is a little kid. Why would this big teenager be messing with this little kid? And I don't know if it's that, like, if you have siblings, you're kind of used to your siblings giving you a hard time and teasing you or mocking you or messing with you. I think he might have been doing some of that big brother teasing. And what matters is it made Sarah angry. And angry was like, Sarah was like, you got to get rid of him. They have got to go. She cannot stay here with that boy. I wanted to be clear that the son that God promised us and the son who's supposed to carry the promise that God gave is here now and has survived his infancy, and he is growing into a healthy young man. And I need them to know that this isn't for them. that the promise that God gave for our child is this. It's for Isaac. And he is distressed. In verse 11, it says it was grievous. It was distressing. It tore Abraham up. Like, how could you tell me I got to get rid of my son? Like, this kid is a teenager, like an older teenager. He was 14 when his younger brother was born. So this is an older teenager at this point, 17 years or so, 16, 17, 18 years old. Like, this is my son. Like, I've spent his whole life with him. What do you mean I have to get rid of him? They have to go away. They can't live with us anymore. Abraham was stressed out because Abraham is a good dad. Abraham is involved with his son. Abraham taught him the things of God. And we see this a little later in the passage. And so Sarah is upset. She is now struggling with the fact that her mistakes are being thrown in her face. When they got the promise, she held on to the promise for a while. But when they couldn't figure it out and they felt like it was taking too long, she interfered and tried to make this promise happen. And she made a mistake. She made a bad decision. I'm not going to say mistake. She made a bad decision. And now the consequences of that bad decision are staring her in the face. And it's hard to sit under that. And none of us really want to do that. Like, I don't want to sit here and stare at a bad decision every day. I don't want to live out the consequences of that bad decision every day. And so she goes to her husband and was like, look, you gotta get rid of this. Let it just be our family. Let it just be us. I don't want these outside people anymore. And her feeling towards them is because she hasn't let go of and healed what she needed to in order to be a different type of person. And so Abraham is vexed. He is not okay with this request. And so he goes to God and God tells him, do not be distressed. Don't be grieved. Don't worry about it. Don't stress about it, because the boy and his mother are okay. The same promise that I made to you that Isaac is going to get, I made a promise for him too. There is provision for this child too. It's okay. Do what your wife is asking. It's okay. I got them. I got a whole different plan. You can let this go, and you can be safe in knowing that I'm taking care of them. Don't worry yourself about it. I know it's a bad situation. I know it's some stuff that y'all shouldn't have been involved in. I know y'all have created this whole family, this second family for you that you weren't supposed to have. But don't worry. When you do what your wife is asking to send them away, I got them. And so in verse 14, it says that Abraham got up early in the morning and he gave them a provision of food and water for their journey. And he sent them on their way. And when they left, Hagar is wandering with her son into the wilderness. And the thing that we need to remember is Hagar is Egyptian. She was not raised or brought up in the culture of Abraham and his people. This is not a God that she believes in or worshiped culturally. This is not a God that was hers from birth. This is something she learned about. And when she was pregnant, she ran off and had an interaction with God in the wilderness. And now she's out in the wilderness again. And it says in verse 15 and 16 that they ran out of food and water. They ran out of water and they're walking through the desert and they are tired and hot and thirsty. And she understands that if I can't provide for him water, this kid's going to die. We're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. We don't have the provision. He's now thirsty. He's now gotten to a place where he's struggling to walk. He's struggling to keep up because I don't have what I need to supply him. I am out of options. I am out of supplies. I am out of everything I need to be a good mom and handle the situation. And I'm done. I have nothing left. And so she puts him under some bushes because one, little shade, but she puts him under some bushes and she moves like he's laying down resting under the bushes because he is now extremely dehydrated. And so she moves away from him. So she's outside of earshot, outside of the clear line of vision. She knows where he is, but she can't see him. And she goes there because she doesn't want to watch him die. I know I don't have the water he needs. I know without water, you're going to die. And I know we're at a point where he needs this. and I can't provide the one thing he needs. And I just need to be away from that because now I feel guilty. I feel responsible. I feel sad because as a mom, I cannot give my child the very thing he needs to survive. And she cries because that would break anybody's heart. Mom, dad, auntie, uncle, it doesn't matter who you are. That would break anybody's heart to know that this child is suffering because of decisions that adults made, and now he's suffering and I can't do anything about it. In verse 17, it says something very important. It says, God heard the voice of the boy. This kid is out here, he's struggling. His mom has decided that there's nothing more she can do. He's about to die. And this child calls out to God on his own. Abraham taught him how to pray. Abraham taught him how to invoke or call on the name of the Lord. He taught him how to reach out to God. He taught him how to trust and have faith. He taught him these things. Abraham was a good dad. He gave his son God. And it says that an angel of God called out to Hagar. God sent a messenger to go talk to Hagar and said, what are you troubled about? Why are you worried? And he says, don't be afraid, for God heard the voice of your son. He heard the voice of the boy. He heard your child call out to him. It didn't have anything to do with your faith. So please, if you are a parent, an aunt, uncle, mentor, an adult that kids trust, teach them to pray, because sometimes their prayers will save their family. Because the same way that boy is out of water, Ishmael is out of water and needing it. His mother is out as well. And so she's getting ready to die as well. The same fate is waiting for her as well. And his prayer pulls God's attention. And so this angel or messenger from God says, hey, get this boy up, hold on to him, because I'm going to make a great nation of him. I am going to absolutely give you the promise or fulfill the promise that I gave you way, way back when you were wandering the desert pregnant with him. I said that he would have princes. I said that he would be a nation. And I'm still going to do that thing. So the same way Abraham had to be reminded, Hagar had to be reminded as well. And so in verse 19, it says, God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. God first gave her instructions. Get up, go get your child, and keep going, because this is not the point where you guys die. This is not the end for you. Here are your instructions. And then he opened her eyes so she can see that the provision she needed was right there. That's when you down to your last and God say, check your purse. And you know you don't got no money in that purse. And God say, check your purse. That voice calls out to you and was like, Go check your top drawer. That little stash where you used to keep all your money at, or your gift cards or whatever it was. God sends you back to that place where you kind of held off, the little bag that you kept all your change in. God say, go check it again. And when you check it, it's something in there that covers your need. Or he tell you to check the mail. You're like, ain't no point in checking the mail. Ain't number bills in there. He tell you check the mail and there's a paycheck from a job 3 jobs ago that they never gave you. There's some provision there. That's that type of situation that she's having. And in verses 20 and 21, it says that this child grew up and he lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. This man becomes a hunter. He becomes a soldier in his own right, a warrior in his own right, because now he has the ability to yield a weapon that is going to provide food and provide safety. So he grows up and he becomes a man that is able to take care of things. His mom finds him a wife, they settle in a land, and this is the space where we see Hagar being freed from the oppression from Sarah, freed from that crazy family situation that she was in. She was bouncing between, servant, side chick, wife, like all of this ambiguity, baby mama, all of that. God was like, leave that foolishness alone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the God that was put into your son and I'm going to move y'all to this space. And I want you all to live on your own. Sometimes you got to break off. Just because you created a situation doesn't mean you have to stay in it. She took her baby and went on down the road. And that's what we have to learn to do. So a very quick recap of everything. It starts off with Sarah actually having a baby at 90 years old and Abraham fathering that child or becoming a father with that child at 100 years old. So these people are 90 and 100. This is not pretend years. This is actual 90 and 100 because she has already mentioned that menopause has set in, and she was surprised that she would even be able to nurse this baby, because how in the world is my body still doing these things well after the time that has been designated for it to happen is over. And so they have this baby after several years of this child. Abraham throws a feast, a big party to celebrate the fact that this child has now been weaned and is moving into his childhood from his infancy and toddler years. And in this feast, Sarah sees Hagar's son Ishmael and Isaac playing, teasing, mocking, give him a hard time, whatever it is that they're doing. She sees it and she is unhappy and tells Abraham to get rid of these people. We don't need them in our family no more. And so Abraham is distressed about it because he is a good dad and he loves his son and does not want to send him away. And God tells him, it's okay. I got a plan for them. Go on and let them walk this path out because I have a plan for them. And when we find ourselves in situations that we created and they are bouncing up in our face, sometimes you end up with the father to one of your children or the mother to one of your children is a whole crazy person. And you were like, Lord, why am I in this? Why do I have to deal with this? Sometimes your mistake is just sits in your face and you see it for years and years and years. But there is a point where God will free you from that. Not because you got to stop taking care of those kids. Not because you get to cancel that relationship and suddenly your children are no longer your responsibility, but because at some point they'll come to an age where you no longer have to go through the crazy parents or the co-parent that you don't want to co-parent with. At some point they become old enough where you can have a relationship with that child directly. There are other mistakes that come up in our face. You made the bad decision on picking this place and now you live in a place where you don't want to be, or you have all types of issues with your house or your apartment because you just wanted what you wanted. And so you have to sit in it for a little while and you get faced with these mistakes over and over again. And part of that is understanding that you can pray to God and ask for a release. Hagar had to live in this situation until God gave her the release. Sometimes it doesn't come the way you want it to. You don't like that job you on and you praying about it because I hate this job and I don't know why I took it and how I got here. Lord, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then they fire you. You're like, how in the world you fire me? It's a release. Because you'll find that when you look back at it several years later, you left that situation, but now you're in a better situation. Hagar leaves this house when she is sent away. They leave this house and she recognizes that now they are out of supplies and she doesn't know what to do. And this kid is going to die because he doesn't have water. And so she separates herself. And this child calls out to God. This young man calls out to God in need, and God hears and answers him. And he answers him with the provision that he needs. Sometimes God gonna do it on his own. Sometimes God gonna do it through somebody else. It doesn't always look pretty when you move from the situation that you don't want to be in to the situation you do want to be in. That path is not always, sometimes it's a desert walking through. Sometimes it's a hill you got to climb. But when you get to the other side, look back and you can see how you've grown and you can see the change that you have in your life and you get to see the difference. And remember that when you're in that space, keep praying. God hears you and he responds to your prayers. Again, this child prayed and saved his family. Him and his mom were saved because of his prayer. Make sure you are teaching your children and the children in your life to pray. Prayer makes a difference. Y'all can manifest and think and believe a whole lot of stuff, but you got to pray and put your faith on God and his promises and his word before you can get anything done. All the rest of that, you can't bring it to you. You got to get God to send it. So they prayed and they were given what they needed. And he in turn grows up and becomes a man and gets a wife and starts his own legacy of people. So I hope that helps you. I hope that makes a whole lot of sense. Remember, teach your kids to pray. Y'all go be blessed.